Welcome to Peaking. Today we're joined by Kevin Price, founder, CEO, and visionary of AccuCode. From a Colorado basement in 1995, Kevin built a barcode tech reseller into a North American leader in mobile computing, wireless networking, and data collection. Now AccuCode's a tech incubator with 3D printing, software divisions, IT services, and operations across the United States. An 8-time Inc. 500 CEO, 7-time Deloitte Fast 50 winner, and EY Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. Kevin's an innovator in tech, science, and automation, and he's just getting started. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Wyatt.
Awesome.
Nice to connect.
Absolutely. How's it going?
Interesting times, to say the least.
How so?
Well,
Let's get into it.
we're intentionally cratering the world's economy right now, and that has an effect on everybody.
I am interested to see it work out. Nobody knows. A lot of people have opinions. A lot of it is affiliated with their political leanings, and you see a lot of people.
There's people that can do basic math that can predict how this is going to turn out too. So, it is what it is.
It is what it is. That is true. I'm actually actively trying to stay off of X. Right now, I spent 0 minutes on it yesterday, and I spent about 1 minute on it today. I failed today, but just putting
LinkedIn
energy.
is the only social media platform I am on. I'm not on any others.
I think that's the right way to live. There's just so much that grabs your attention. It's literally designed that way. I used to hire UX researchers for Meta, and they need PhDs in how to grab people's attention. It's like psychologists joining these apps to just grab as much time as they can from your life, and it returns nothing. There's literally nothing that's returned.
I think it's the worst thing humanity's ever done to itself. We've created a self-defeating mechanism that convinces the whole world that somebody else's life is better than theirs.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think it's gonna last forever. I think people eventually will figure it out, and it's just kind of this cycle in technology evolution that hopefully we will get out of. You see people kind of waking up to it. Obviously, people spread the word on the very platforms that they talk bad about. But I envy your freedom. I think it's accessible to everybody. Everyone can log out and delete the accounts.
The last time I had an active Facebook profile was when my kids were little, and the only reason I was on there was to monitor their activities. And I haven't posted anything in over 25 years. And despite that, Facebook continues to have my profile active and convinces people I haven't talked to since high school that I'm still connected to them and communicating with them on Facebook, when in fact I have not logged in 25 years.
Oh, that's too good.
Never ceases to amaze me how delusional people can be, and how the world has decided to use technology to keep them engaged, even when the engagement is fake. It's not real.
And worthless.
Worthless.
It is useful for certain things. I have alumni groups. I was the organizer for our reunion for our high school, and I could access almost everyone very quickly. That was nice. Yeah. And I don't know how else you would do it. I don't know how they organized reunions in the past. Did schools have emails for everybody? I have no idea how they would do it before social media. Maybe it was just by word of mouth and calling people, but
I don't know.
99% of it is a waste, and totally with you there. And I appreciate your anger about it too, because it really is
really something more. It's just I counsel people all the time: get off your phone. Yes. You want to accomplish more in life? Stop watching other people.
Tired of protein bars that taste like cardboard or come loaded with junk you can't pronounce? Let me put you onto something better. Mammoth bars. These are bars you actually want to eat. They're certified organic, raw, low in sugar, high in protein, completely free of gluten, dairy, soy, or any weird fillers. Just clean, real ingredients, handcrafted in small batches for maximum freshness. Whether you're feeling a long hike, recovering after the gym, or just trying to survive back-to-back meetings, Mammoth bars are legit. They're the go-to athletes, execs, and even picky toddlers. So if you're ready to upgrade your snack game, go to mammothbar.com and use the code PEAKING at checkout for a discount. Again, that's peaking because you're not just eating, you're fueling. That's mammothbars.com/peaking. Yep. Yeah, I had a conversation with a direct report a few years ago, and they were struggling. Their performance was not good. And I'm talking about how to get better. And I go, show me your screen time on your phone. Like, where are you at? How much time are you spending on your
Yeah.
phone? And pulls it up, and it's well over 6 hours a day. And it's like, okay, there's
Yeah.
your answer right there. And it was a tough pill to swallow. You just don't even think about it. Anyway, all right, let's get on to
Yeah.
AccuCode and what you've
More
built.
interesting things.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, 25 years ago, so you were in sales initially, selling barcode services or something of the to the effect.
I'd been in the industry for 1 year. I was 26 years old. I quit my job on Friday and started this on Monday. And as I tell people, I had no idea how unqualified to do what I was setting out to do. I was, and that's one of the wonderful things about youth is that that's the time to go do the things that you don't know that you're not qualified to do, and you go figure it out along the way.
What did the safety net look like for you? Were you living in a real low rent spot? Did you have a good little nest egg saved up? Do you have immediate
Oh no.
customers?
Oh no, I put $1,500 on my credit cards, and I had no idea. I just bought my first house. My first child was on the way. I this was in July of '95, and um, my first daughter, was born just a couple of months after that, the end of August. So it was very stressful to begin with. I was fortunate. My first day, I landed a couple of customers that were pre-existing connections, and those two companies actually paid my house payment that first year,
Awesome. So you had money coming in pretty quickly.
and almost immediately. Yeah,
And did you know that as you were getting into it, like you were in that
no
type of
idea.
sales role?
Nope, nope. Had no idea how far down it was. I just ran and jumped off the cliff.
That's amazing. Having a kid and just bought a house and then going into business is quite a risk. Have you always been a risk taker, or had you?
Yes, absolutely. In
Or
general, I will say I've lived a fortunate life, other than a very dysfunctional childhood. In general, all I have to do is show up and try, and usually things turn out pretty well for me.
that's awesome. Yeah, that is. There's something to that, obviously, and who you are, and the ability to put effort in, and perhaps intelligence behind the effort as well. But that is
I'm a student and a scientist at heart, and if you'll give me the opportunity to study anything, I will. I have been since I was a little kid, and if you're not willing to try, then there's absolutely no chance of success. And if you, I believe that if you go out in the world every day with good intention, that karma is a real thing. It's the basic laws of physics in action in our society. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, always. And the universe is always in balance. And if you put out good energy and good intent towards the world, then, you get that back multiplied times the number of people you affected with it. And I, my whole company, we exist for one purpose. We want to help everybody. We're trying to help our customers, our trading partners, our employees, and I don't care whether you want my help or not. I'm still going to try and help you.
walk us through the first couple months, maybe the first year of AccuCode. Was it named AccuCode? Has it been the same name for 25 years?
No, that first year, it had another name, and I changed the name after a survey of my customers, And this AccuCode, ironically, was one of the 5 names I put out in the survey, and it gave me the second listing in the yellow pages under the barcode section. And this is back. This is back when the yellow pages actually, was important and a source of leads, because it was, very early in the internet days. And my first business email account was an AOL account. It was AccuCode at AOL.com. And yeah, it served me well.
I
The
remember,
customers chose wisely.
yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. Customer feedback, a foundation of business success. The AOL days, I was around for those. You're not dating yourself. I had an AIM account. The kids were active on AIM. That was revolutionary. We could talk to each other from our house. That was really really neat for me. I grew up without a cell phone. We grew up without a TV. We didn't have video games really.
Good for
Very,
you.
yeah, very interesting childhood. That's a whole nother story. Sounds like you have one there as well.
Yeah.
But we had one computer. Eventually, I forget why we got the computer, but it would dial up. You heard the noise, and somehow we got AIM. I don't think my parents knew about it, and I had one friend that I was able to message. I think a lot of other people had a much more built out system, but I do remember those days. So
I bought my first computer in the late 70s. It was a Commodore 64. I mowed an incredible amount of lawns to pay for that computer and the little tape drive storage device that I put with it. Um, I taught myself BASIC when I was 9, and that
wow.
was my introduction into computers.
Was that just innate? You think it's just luck of who you are, the code behind
My
your brain
grandmother
to
bought me a physics set, a chemistry set, and an electrical engineering set when I was like 8 years old, and I was hooked from there on. And I've been studying physics, electrical engineering, chemistry, astrophysics, any area of engineering and scientific study. If I have an opportunity to sit and read some paper about it, I will. And
uh,
I'm a walking encyclopedia of mostly useless knowledge.
well, sounds like I need to recruit you for our trivia team in Denver.
I am really good at that too.
I love trivia. I'm a big trivia guy. The uh, engineering set is funny. My nephew is, or my brother has 4 kids. The oldest is very methodical and careful about everything. My brother is just a sports guy. He wants all his kids to be just as active as possible, play every sport, and live vicariously through them. He's that dad. You see those dads around.
Yep.
He's not
Yep.
he's not awful at sporting events, but he's close. And I see a different kid in this kid. I think athletics are good for all kids, just to be
Yeah.
clear. But he's clearly intelligent, very smart, thinks about everything. And so I bought him these little engineering kits, and I was hoping they'd catch on. There's just so much else to grab your attention. So he
Oh
builds
yeah,
them
it's so
from time
different
to
now.
time.
I
Yeah.
spent I spent months trying to code my own first video game. I was trying to do this little Astro Smash game on the Commodore 64, and oh my, it never worked. Like it literally never. I spent months coding it, debugging it, and it never worked. It was terrible. It was a very,
Oh,
very, very defeating experience, but it didn't dissuade me from the technology itself. And I grew up in Oklahoma, and to say I was one of the only kids in my experience that was into this kind of stuff back then. I was a nerd's nerd in a place where it was not cool to be a nerd.
I can imagine. Yeah, Oklahoma would not be the typical place computers were shipped in the 70s.
No, if it wasn't for football and wrestling, I wouldn't have fit in at all.
Oh, that's awesome. You're well-rounded. In Gladwell's book about outliers, he talks like how Bill Gates became Bill Gates, and he was just in the perfect incubator for a Bill
Yeah,
Gates to be delivered.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's how
awesome.
those
So
things start.
you've obviously grown the company quite a bit in 30 years. Talk through the early days. I think that's most of my audience are people that are thinking about getting out of the corporate world, people that are starting out, the founder community here in Denver. What were those early days like? Some major challenges you faced?
You know, the early days are always challenging. You lack credibility. One of the reasons I picked the name was because there was several other companies in this industry, what today is called the AIDC industry. It stands for Automated Information and Data Collection. And back then, there were several companies that started with the Accu vernacular. So there was AccuSort and there was AccuScan, and AccuCode gave me mistaken name recognition. And I would go into meetings and people would, I literally intentionally didn't put any title on my business card. You find out he's the CEO of the company you just hired. And so literally I would not disclose that I was the CEO and owner of the business. And often I would get mistaken name recognition because they thought they had heard of AccuCode, because there were other companies in the industry that kind of sounded like that. And I just didn't correct them. And I would often use I'm going to have to talk to my boss about that strategy when it came to negotiating, because it was standard practice in almost every meeting I went to that somebody would ask me how old I was. And if it wasn't for facial hair, I looked like I wasn't old enough to drink. And, I grew the first goatees just because it made me look older. And it was an issue. And nobody expects the young guy to be in charge. And so, um, being the thoughtful organizer, I counsel young people all the time. You want to go start a business, find a problem that you have a passion for solving it. And when you do that, it's a question of how big's the problem, how many people have it, and how big an old boy are you? Because how thoughtful and organized can you be? Because that will decide how many people you can help with that problem. And for AccuCode, it's about creating, efficiency. Typically, as I say, the core of what we do is creating accurate real-time visibility, because if you can't see it, you can't drive any kind of consistent outcomes or behavior. If you're not watching, humans will not behave the way you want them to. And it's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The act of observing changes the outcome always. And the expectations of the observer shape the behavior of matter and energy in the moment. That includes all humans. So simply by letting everybody know, hey, I know everything that's going on all the time and I have data on it in real time. So if you make a mistake, own it. Don't pretend you didn't do it, because it's going to show up in the data. And today, that's part of how we do business with our customers. Our software for work that runs the whole company literally gives our customers and our trading partners real-time visibility of everything we're working on together, how it turned out and why, and here's pictures. And that transparency builds trust. And in business, there's no greater asset than your customers trusting you, unlike your competition. And it's transformational when the guy that you're solving the problem for understands that he can trust you completely, that you're going to do it. Not only are you going to do what you said you're going to do, but when it doesn't turn out the way we wanted it to, that you're going to own it and take responsibility for it and make it right. And that's it. And it doesn't really matter what the problem is. The world's full of problems. And in the last 30 years, my best growth periods were during recessions. Because, as I say, when people are growing and profitable, they're not very motivated to get more efficient. But when their hair's on fire and the world's burned down around them, they get very motivated. And all of a sudden, they're willing to entertain things and invest in things that in good times they would have never done. But because they're facing hardship, they're forced to figure it out. And so doesn't really, there's no such thing as a bad time to start a new business. You just got to align yourself to the moment.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good stuff. Where you started, what was your product or service offering? Because you've developed a lot. You've obviously pivoted or changed things somewhat or a lot since.
Those
What did
first,
you
yeah.
start? What problem were you setting out to fix when you started?
Um, Prior to starting AccuCode, my first exposure to the industry was in what the supply side of the business. So this was barcode labels and printer ribbons. And my first job out of college was with the division of NCR. One of the products we sold there was barcode labels and printer ribbons. And so that was where I had the most knowledge and expertise in the industry. When I got my first hardware sales job, any training, any demo equipment, just a black and white catalog with list prices and a quota. And after a year and not a whole lot of success, I quit and started this. And my first week, I closed a couple of existing customers on becoming their new label supplier because I had already been selling them labels. They knew me. I had already proven my expertise in the area, and I became a reliable supplier. And one of those companies was a company called Jerry Baby Products, and at the time they were the largest manufacturer of car seats and high chairs in the United States. And a few years after that, they got bought by Spalding Sporting Goods, and they shut down all their U.S. manufacturing and tried to move it to Puerto Rico. And shortly thereafter, Jerry Baby Products ceased to exist. And that what was my biggest customer just went away overnight. And then there was a company that still exists today called Wilkerson Corporation. They're today owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and they made air filters for big commercial compressors. And I was selling same thing. I was selling them very specialized barcode labels to go on air compressor filters. and and that those consumables gave me cash flow and the ability to pay my personal bills and to start hiring my first employees.
So, what is the business of labels? You're shipping them like actual barcodes you just stick on their boxes?
No, I'm sending them rolls and cases of labels, in many cases customized labels. So they might be specialized synthetic materials that have specific adhesives on them and a specific type of coating on them so that they'll survive high temperatures or cold temperatures or whatever environmental conditions they need to be. And then those are going to be run through a barcode label printer, and typically there's a ribbon involved in that has to be matched up with the face stock of the label just right so that you get a durable print that doesn't just rub off. Um, and those consumables, like Jerry Baby Products, I was making $4,000 or $5,000 a month off of, and this is back in the 90s when that was, 3 times as much that money.
Yeah.
Just shipping them 4x6 shipping labels because they were shipping out like 60,000 cases a month to Walmart, Target, and Kmart of high chairs and vape chairs.
So, did you have a printer yourself, or you ordered them from
They no,
the
they
some?
I sold printers and they ran printers in their facilities. The printer manufacturer is a company called Zebra Technologies. And after several mergers and acquisitions, Zebra to this day is my number one hardware vendor and has been for most of the last 30 years. Today, they are the world leader in industrial mobile computing, barcode scanning, label printing, mobile printing, all of those applications. Most recently, they've bought robotics companies and RFID, and most recently, they're making big investments into visual cognition.
Incredible. As one of the best things that's come out of starting this podcast is just discovering, and recruiting in general, is just discovering so many different corners and maybe not corners, just aspects of the economy that you would never interact with. Like
Back,
when I started in,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead. You go, please.
When I started in staffing, I had no idea that staffing existed until I started interviewing. I was like, "What are these? What is this?" I had no idea, and it's like a $500 billion industry, and no idea the industry existed. And here I am 10 years later still in it. And that is a beautiful piece of recruiting as well. You talk to people from all these different companies, you have to learn about 1% of what they actually do in recruiting. You really don't need to be an engineer to recruit engineers, obviously, but that is fascinating.
It's
That company, so they print, you still hire them to print everything that you're delivering to your customers?
I, you're misunderstanding. The customers do the printing themselves. The printing is done on demand, typically as part of their manufacturing or their logistics operations. They're either putting a label on a case or on a product or on a pallet, and most companies are doing all of those things. And it's the razor blade business. You sell the printers, you sell the service on the printers, and you sell the labels and the ribbons to print it with. And the labels and the ribbons are where most of the money was, especially back then. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Colorado was kind of the center of the storage world for the computer industry. So we had Storage Tech and Maxtor and Seagate and Quantum, and we were the manufacturing hub for tape drives and hard drives for the whole world. The design and the engineering for all three major hard drive manufacturers back then was all done here in Colorado. And at one point, we were the barcode label supplier to all of those guys, and as well as storage tech. And that became, I hired one sales guy that had some relationships in that space, and he ended up bringing in, turning it into our earliest vertical success, where we went into an entire industry and just made a lot of
Captured it.
money. And that was all right
Yeah.
before Y2K. And then we got into industrial mobile computing and the network infrastructure side of things. And Y2K was one of the best things that ever happened to my company, because we did the upgrade, the systems upgrade for Coors Brewing and Storage Tech back in 99, 2000. And that was a huge growth spurt for us. Those were huge projects.
Awesome. I definitely want to get to that. Let's jump back to getting to the point where you hired your first employee. At what point did you know that you needed someone, and how did you go about that process?
Um, that boy, that's a weird, strange story. So I ended up. I don't even remember how I posted it or where. I think it was social networking that I ended up finding this local woman. At the time, I was still working out of the basement of my house in Castle Rock, Colorado, and I was introduced to this local woman who had just gone through a divorce and needed a job, and she hadn't worked in a while, and I needed somebody to answer phones and to do basic bookkeeping work. And she literally came to my house every morning and worked out of the basement of my house, which was not a finished basement. I just had a rug with some. I had two desks and a Packard Bell computer and a HP LaserJet printer, and I didn't even have QuickBooks or any accounting software. I created a series of spreadsheets that was my purchase orders and my invoices and my accounts receivable and payable ledgers. And that, I was doing it. I was, at the time before her, I was working, 10, 12 hours a day. because I was selling it. I was doing all the installation and service and support, and I was having to do all the back office ordering and accounting stuff and all that kind of stuff. And so that was the first person I hired, was to come in and do some bookkeeping and answer phones and that kind of stuff. And it was many years later, it turns out that that woman was an aunt to my second wife's best friend from high school. So years after I had let her go, um, we're getting ready to go to. I'm getting my second marriage, and we're going to celebrate the engagement of her best friend from high school, and we're in her parents' house, the friend's house, and here's this woman that used to work for me. Her aunt shows up at the party, and it became a very small world moment. Uh, so I years after she was my employee, we came back into each other's lives socially because of a mutual social connection.
There was no hard feelings.
No, I'd gone away on a business trip, and I was expecting this important shipment, and she was the only one at the office. I had moved out of the basement of my office and had gotten our first real office space. It was not nice. It was terrible and super cheap. But she was she was apparently afraid to be alone in the office by herself, and so she had locked the door. And the truck showed up for this to drop off this product, and she wouldn't answer the door. And I'm getting calls from the driver going, "Hey, I'm here to deliver this pallet, but nobody's answering the door, and she's not answering the phone." And so I missed the shipment. And when I got back, I fired her for it, because your whole job was to be here. I told you this was happening. The guy's knocking on the door. All you had to do was answer it or answer the phone, and you did none of those things. And so this isn't going to work out. But yeah, that was my first employee. And that first office lasted us for a few years. It was a walkout basement office in the bottom of a 2-story retail building in the middle of downtown Castle Rock. And we moved out of and when we moved out of there, we moved into our first, what I'll call, real office space, which was up in Denver, just off of Evans and I-25.
So how many employees did you have then? And did you just scale
By
by
then,
you're doing all the
I
sales?
think we were pushing like 10 people when we moved to Denver.
Wow.
I've got two team members that are still here today that were part of that move. My CFO and one of my sales administrators. She's actually my longest term employee. She's been here for like 28, 29 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Why does she stay?
She actually left for about 2 years and then came back after a pretty serious car accident. Um, she This is family to her, and she
Hmm.
loves working here, and she's made good money. And I that's the best part of what I've gotten to do over the last 30 years, is that I've got a collection of pretty amazing people who work here because they care about me. They are fiercely loyal and protective of both me and the company. And it's because I've done unusual things their whole time here, that many employers would not do, to take care of my people. uh, you know, Medical emergencies, or somebody's house burns down, or things. Life is hard, and sometimes it just kicks your ass. And if you don't have anybody to support you, that can be devastating. And as somebody who really never had any family to rely on like that, I can relate. And frankly, as I say all the time, look, as an employer, if I make it clear every day that I don't care about you, that it's only about me and what you can do for me, well, then why would you care about me or how it turns out for my business? And, you know, I, I'm here trying to help everybody. And like I said, and I don't care whether you want my help or not. I'm still going to try and help you, and especially with the employees. And it's I take great pride and pleasure in the fact that I've gotten to build my own family, and I call it my own little happy bubble, because inside of my bubble it works the way I say, and it's a nice place to live. And we take care of our people and our customers and our trading partners, and we're always trying to do the right thing. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, because I'm not going to lie for you. If you're my vendor and you've been misleading the customer, I'm going to pull your pants down in front of everybody and point it out. And I have no compunctions or apologies about it. I don't work for you. I work for the customer. My job is to make sure they get the best deal they can and that their problem gets solved. And if you're not acting in the best interest of that mutual goal, well, then we're not on the same team. And I might be forced to uh, you know unmask you in front of the customer.
Yeah. I think that's something I've experienced in my previous jobs, and it's just so clear that business is about serving customers. You don't have a business if you don't have customers. And as soon as they're not your top priority, your business goes downhill. You cannot sustain a business if your top priority is not your customer. And that was one of Bezos' philosophy building Amazon, is like the number one priority is always the customer. Like, how can we
Has to
make
be.
their experience better? And I've worked with people that, have business degrees, MBAs, and they're talking about things that are not good for the customer that are good for the business. It's like the priority is the customer. Anytime you get away from that, we're going the wrong way. And it is I think maybe people that don't have experience losing things and everything goes well, like you talked about earlier, where you're not going to change things because everything's going well, or you want to maybe take a bigger chunk because things are going well. That's just a recipe for failure. And people will build product that they think is going to be an incredible product, but there's no customers for it. Customers don't want that product. And
Well, look
so if
look
you're
look
not
at
constantly,
look at what's happening to Tesla right now. I'm a Tesla fan. I made a lot of money off of Tesla stock. I've bought 3 Teslas, and now they lost me, as well as most of the rest of the customers around the world, because the the people that aligned with Tesla and the problem they were trying to solve for the world are not the same people that align with that political view now. And so literally you put yourself in direct conflict with the guy you're trying to sell to and earn his trust every day. And that's just bad for the business. And here we are, the board, in to protect themselves, are now asking Elon Musk to resign from Tesla because he put himself on the opposite side of the equation from everybody he was trying to do business with. And that has consequences. I,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Calculated risk, I imagine. I don't think he doesn't calculate anything, but
yeah, no
Jordan
doubt.
famously never took. Jordan said Republicans buy sneakers too. And he was just constantly badgered to take sides on social issues, and he's just like, my,
Don't do
my
it.
business is everybody. Yeah,
I have to keep myself neutral. You don't know.
yeah.
I fired a VP of marketing once because he made some very inappropriate, what he thought were funny posts on LinkedIn, and he literally, we had just sold some products to a customer in Dubai through our 3D division, and he put a post up on LinkedIn about some Muslims being eaten
Uh,
by wild pigs.
oh,
And
oh.
I'm like, dude, you're my VP of marketing. I don't care what your personal politics are, but I can't have you making those kind of posts. And then he did it again, and that's why he got fired.
That's insanity. That is
Well, and
that's
just keep your politics out of your business. It shouldn't be part of
yeah.
your profile. And there's always, no matter which side of the equation you're on, you're going to offend somebody, and
Yep.
half of them are your customers, and that
Yep.
that just doesn't work out very well. Our biggest customer since 1999 has been the Kroger company. And that was really my big break back in 99. We won a project at Kroger to build their first generation of home grocery delivery business software. And I had to go recruit the whole team to do the project. I had already I competed for and lost that project originally. I was in no way qualified to do it. But I had this, a very compelling vision for how the problem could be solved. And I wrote a 30-page paper about how it ought to be done. And I convinced what was King Soopers and Kroger to hire us. And we ended up building that whole project, and I built the whole team around that. Part of that team still works here today. And between 99 and 2002, we built that system for Kroger, 3 separate systems actually. And it was supposed to be a 5-store pilot. It was going to run for 6 months. It ran from 2002 to 2018, and it handled over 3.5 million e-commerce orders. And we had to build an entire GIS-based routing system from scratch because this was all before Google Maps. So you couldn't just go type in an address and get directions for how to get there. We had to go build a tool that allowed the driver to download turn-by-turn directions for his 2-hour route. And because he didn't have internet connection once he left the store. So we had to go download the turn-by-turn directions and maps onto a mobile device before he left the store so that he could go run his routes and hit every house, within his delivery commitment of 20 minutes. And that the fact that we pulled that project off, that we hit every deadline and did it on a fixed bid and succeeded, led to a reputation with Kroger of being the get it done guys. And over for the last 20 plus years, we've been engaged typically to solve problems that somebody else has already failed at. We're almost always the second guy hired because the first guy was the low bidder and he failed miserably. And now we're being asked to come in and clean it up and fix it.
Do you remember who you bid against?
Yeah, it was a local Denver company called Navidac. And at the time, they were a .com era darling. They were publicly traded on NASDAQ. And they had just built DriveOff.com for Microsoft. And they were eminently more qualified to do that project than we were based on their resume and their pedigree. Unfortunately, after a year and $1 million of Kroger's money, they delivered nothing that worked. And I was originally hired to do just the fulfillment system. And then just a couple of weeks into that effort, they asked us to take over the e-commerce piece of it as well. And we ended up building an e-commerce piece, an order fulfillment piece, and then a customer service platform that tied it all together for the call center. And we helped design the pick carts and the delivery trucks. The whole system and whole process. We became the consultants that helped Kroger figure out how to go do that in a scalable, repeatable, sustainable way, and to basically run a scaled delivery operation out of their existing retail stores. And it lasted. That system ran for a really long time, a lot longer than we expected. And they were paying us time and materials for maintenance on that system for the whole time that it ran.
Incredible. I remember those days. I wasn't driving yet, but we got MapQuest and you download or you try to figure out where you're going.
I used to go into MapQuest and print out the directions and the maps before I left for my meetings because you had to have the hard copy in the car with you because you couldn't do it from your phone.
Yeah, you're like looking at the paper, looking for the street sign.
Before that, I carried around a Rand McNally Road Atlas in my car all the time, and that was how you did it.
What was the first GPS thing that you would put on the dash? A Garmin? Was it Garmin?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think if you had a Garmin, you were very impressive.
That was a big deal. But yeah,
so,
that became the basis of what ended up being, at this point, a 25-year relationship with Kroger. And we've solved a lot of problems for them over the years. Still are.
How do you think you pulled that off? How did you, starting with hiring and then, product system development?
Hire qualified people and then get out of their way and let them do their jobs. Give them what they need from a tools and a resources standpoint. I have a general philosophy of small teams. Um, that whole team was like 11 people that did that whole project. You know, Microsoft and IBM both tried to replicate that project after we had done that pilot system. Both of them failed miserably. They went through hundreds of millions of dollars and delivered nothing that worked, and wasted like 15 years of Kroger's time. That was part of the reason why that system ran as long as it did. They tried to replace it several times and spent unbelievable amounts of money failing to do so because the guys that they hired, threw bodies at it, and that's just not what the problem was about. And more people is not better, especially when you're talking about software. The more people involved in the effort, the longer it's going to take, and the lower the quality will be. And part of the reason why we were successful and they weren't is because we did it with like 10, 11 people. They literally had 50 plus working on it, and they failed miserably. And get the right people. Have a clear vision for how you're going to solve the problem. Go hire the people to go solve it that way, and then get out of their way and let them do it.
As a business owner, CEO, running these from either above or in the trenches, how deep do you get technically understanding everything? Do you just trust that people have things handled, or are you learning every single aspect of what's going on to be able
Uh,
to
I
jump in
yeah,
and assist?
I don't have time to go get down into the nuts and bolts of everything. Um, the last programming language I learned was BASIC. So I'm not a developer. I'm not qualified to go debug anybody's stuff. And it's, I, I want to see the results. I want to understand the architectural choices we're making and why. And I influence those kind of high level decisions. But when it comes to, the actual coding, that's not my place. And I I got super lucky. I got a guy that's incredibly talented. He brought some people he had worked with before with him, and he's worked for me since 1999. He's still my lead architect, and
Incredible.
he can code J2EE Java at 100 words a minute with less than a 1% error rate, and on a keyboard with no characters on the keys, just black keys. And it looks inhuman when you watch him code. When he's actually typing, he's typing so fast that you're like, that can't be real code. And then you look at what's on the screen, and you're like, oh my god. And it's really, but that's like 1% of the population of software engineers on the planet that can do that kind of stuff. And uh, his brother came to work for me some years later and has now been working for me for like 17 years, and he's my COO. And he's brilliant in a whole other set of ways, and is an incredible operations manager and people manager and business manager. And he came out to visit his brother one year for Christmas, and I recruited him, and he's been here ever since. And it really is part of what, when he first came to work for me, we were still in the $30 million range, and he's the reason why I've been able to scale this up to 100.
Awesome.
We've been
Yeah.
running now. We're about 100 employees, about $100 million a year in revenue. So almost $1 million per W-2 employee a year, and we've been at that run rate for a long time. Excuse me.
No worries.
Phone call coming out on my computer.
All good.
Sorry about that.
That's do you know what the new generation calls that type of developer?
What?
Cracked.
Cracked. Well, his name's Wyatt, by the way, and he's brilliant. He's truly brilliant. And I learned a long time ago
The
that,
next two of us.
yeah, he's self-taught, and he can play the piano, like beautiful concertos kind of stuff. He's an amazing cook. He's studied multiple martial arts. He's an expert in woodworking and all kinds of other hobbies and stuff. But he's just a brilliant engineer.
A Renaissance man.
No doubt.
Wow, that's impressive. How have you retained him?
Um, Being a thoughtful, engaging, and generous employer. He's made a lot of money working for me over the years, and um, I set we often set very high objectives, and when we meet them, I sometimes ask customers for incentive bonuses because they want to get things done super fast, and that means I'm going to have somebody to work overtime to get it done, and Wyatt's done that on more than one occasion where he stepped up and did something that nobody thought could be done in a time frame. We once launched to take over a new service contract at Kroger. We had to go build a system to run the depot process. We called it Lifecycle. The original application was somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 lines of code, and he did that in about a 4 or 5 week period all by himself.
Legend.
And
Legendary.
that system ran uninterrupted from the day it went live for like 15 years. So and it ended up being like 1.5 million plus lines of code before it was decommissioned. But he did the first original 400,000 to 500,000 lines in a matter of weeks.
And he would be the kind of technical lead on most of the projects that you're
He's been
winning.
the senior software architect here at AccuCode since '99. And it's very unusual to retain that kind of person in this kind of industry. Software engineers typically move from one project to the next. One of the reasons he's told me that he stayed at AccuCode is this is the only job he's ever had where every software product he ever built actually went into production and ran. 2/3 of the software projects that get commissioned in the United States never go live. Like companies spend millions of dollars having software developed that when it actually is shown up and tested is so bad that it literally never gets turned on.
Is that a real stat?
Go look up the Software Trade Association. They've been keeping track of this statistic for decades. And it's been a while since I've checked, but for most of the last 30 years, something like 2/3 of spending on software in the United States is either to patch my old broken crap just to keep it running, or it's spent on projects that never get turned on. That's 2/3 of all the money spent on software development at an industrial level in the United States.
Do the vendors or the clients, the people booking these projects, ever have any type of insurance where if your product doesn't
Dude,
work?
SAP back during the Y2K period was one of the biggest scams I ever saw. The reason Coors is owned by InBev today is because of the cost and burden that SAP put on them when they adopted it around their Y2K initiatives. Same thing happened to Storage Tech. Storage Tech does not exist as a company today. They got bought by Oracle and shut down. And the cost of SAP is what broke that company and pushed them into having to get bought just to survive. And uh, I don't know why anybody. Price Waterhouse used to brag that they had statistics to show that the decision makers that made the decision to buy SAP, that something like 2/3 of them didn't work for the company by the time SAP got turned on. Well, Price Waterhouse was saying this was because their SAP experience made them more employable and they all went and got better jobs. Um, the lawsuits that were filed against Price Waterhouse claimed that that was the exact opposite, that those people all got fired or had to leave because in the middle of their SAP implementation, it became apparent to senior management that they had just crippled themselves and might not ever recover from the decision they had made to adopt that accounting system. It was ridiculously overpriced. It was cumbersome, and it came with its own programming language. What what kind of software is it you're building that couldn't use any of the existing other languages that already had been applied to enterprise software? But SAP built their own language, ABAP, just so that they could charge 4 or 5 times extra for doing development in their SAP environment, and it still works that way today. And it's it, it's not an it's just an accounting system, and it doesn't facilitate meaningful operational success. It's as I say, it's an autopsy tool. I can tell you why the patient died 2 weeks ago, but I can't do anything about it today. And
That sounds like a decision made by an MBA or Steve Jobs, one of the two.
yeah, well,
Which are very different.
it makes it. Well, there for a while, it was kind of like the old days back. There used to be a phrase that nobody gets fired for hiring IBM, which is absolutely not true anymore. But there was a time when that was true, and then there was a time where nobody got fired for choosing SAP, because it was the Fortune 500 accounting platform that everybody else was picking, especially during that Y2K phase. And that was when they established their dominance in corporate accountancy. And to this day, I don't know why. I can't give you any meaningful reason for their success. Because from my perspective, they never solved any of those problems the right way. And I for both Storage Tech and Coors, because we were involved in their SAP projects around Y2K, we did the warehouse systems that went with the SAP. We added things that allowed them to collect data from DOS mobile devices and push that data back up into SAP transactions in real time from the warehouse. And I was sitting in these meetings at Coors and Storage Tech, and the amounts of money and the timelines, and I literally, it was criminal. I told the customers, you are being scammed. I could go do this entire project from scratch. I'll build you the perfect software to go run this entire company for a fraction, for literally 25% of what you're spending to buy SAP and implement it. And of course, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to take on that custom development effort, because some young kid told them that, hey, this is crazy. I can do this way cheaper. Let me show you. And, it's true. I could have saved them millions, but nobody cared. Nobody, and I got told very quickly to sit down and shut up. And I did. I did my part of the project and kept my mouth shut and just stopped participating in those group project meetings, because it was triggering for me. It's hard for me to sit there and watch while somebody's picking your pocket without saying anything.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that is unfortunate that Coors had to you'd want Coors to be owned in Colorado. NBev is they're so big, and I think it's a family owned company, and the lady, she's like the matriarch of the group. She owns like 120,000 acres in Montana, and my uncle is her lead rancher. She
Oh,
just has like she just got a maybe this shouldn't be public, but she's got one of the largest properties in Montana and just
yeah.
has a ranch with cattle just for fun. It's just a little side quest for
I
her.
saw a statistic this morning on Reddit, that basically the top 1% of the world has siphoned $80 trillion off of the other 99% of the population in the last 50 years of human history. $80 trillion,
See,
50 years.
now you're kind of speaking to the other side here. This is the whole point of these current economic decisions.
I it goes back
We
to my
need a
statement about being an
manufacturing base.
employer. If as your
Yeah.
employer, if I make it really clear that I don't care about you or your welfare, why would you care about me or mine? And
Yep.
that to me, as I say, there's only so many ways to solve the same problem. But if your approach to solving the problem isn't scalable, repeatable, and sustainable, well, then you didn't really solve the problem. You just traded one set of problems for another set of problems. When you create an economic environment with such incredible imbalance, that's not scalable, that's not repeatable, and it's not sustainable. And you're taking 99% of the population of the planet and saying they're not nearly as important as this 1%. And I'm sorry, that is the definition of not a solution to the problem. You just traded one set of problems for another set of problems. And if you
Perhaps. But
and
our
if you want to
current
fix it,
situation was
you got to come up with an approach that does a better job of paying those who really create value, because the guy with the money isn't the one who created the value.
sometimes, yes, this is can be true. In terms of pivoting a business, you've probably made some decisions. Sounds like I almost announced that a few products that you still have on your LinkedIn
Right.
that are no longer in production, are not working. Talk a little bit about failures that you've had to come to terms with, and how quickly you made those decisions.
I'm stubborn and I hate to fail. Um, you touched on one of them, and apparently I need to update my LinkedIn profile. But jellyfish. So this was an application that we developed. I made some industry contacts into the hospitality, particularly the restaurant management space, and there's a big problem in liquor inventory and management in the served by the drink industry. And to this day, there's effectively no real solution out in the marketplace. You've got a couple of really big, distributors and sales organizations that represent most of that industry. Southern Wines and Spirits being one of the big ones now. They've got something like 80,000 sales reps covering the United States. So to this day, there's a
I
sales
was
rep.
almost one of them.
Yep. There's a sales rep that goes into almost every bar and restaurant in this country multiple times a month and goes in and takes a physical inventory and makes a recommendation to the manager of that facility on what he should order on his next order. And then those handwritten orders get typed in and transmitted to their employer at the end of the day, as that salesperson sits at as one of his customers' bar. He's spending 2 hours a day doing manual reporting and order entry functions, when we basically built Jellyfish and we're giving it away as a free application to the bar and restaurant, because we believed that we were going to be able to monetize all of that inventory visibility and movement information by selling it to the companies that wanted to sell booze, and promoters that wanted to promote specific brands and all that kind of stuff. And what we found is that we we had it was a legitimate problem. It was a big industry with lots of money tied to it. Southern Wines and Spirits and Cisco Foods and guys like that all wanted to see this problem solved. And the problem is that, like Cisco Foods had built a system and had bought a whole bunch of iPads and given it away to all their customers just to order from them. Well, the problem is that system only worked to order from Cisco, and I'm doing business with 5 other wholesale distributors, and I don't want to use a system that just works for one of my vendors, and I'm not going to. If I today am ordering through spreadsheets that I send to all 5 of my distribution suppliers, well, I'm going to keep doing those spreadsheets because I'm not going to adopt one new method for one vendor. If we don't, there are all kinds of industrial problems like that, where if an entire industry doesn't get together and agree to solve the same problem the same way for everybody, nobody gets a solution, because it's death by 1,000 cuts if everybody solves that problem their own way, and selfishly so. So we created this solution that you could order food and booze, basically anything you needed to run a restaurant. The whole idea was we were giving this app away, and it was free on Android and iOS, and you could scan the barcodes, create your orders, and take an order that might be to 5 or 6 or 10 different vendors, and just hit transmit, and it would take all those individual line items and divide them up into orders by vendor and electronically transmit them, and then bring you back data about how those orders were filled and the accounting transactions associated to it. It was a big problem with billions of dollars potentially tied to it, and we couldn't literally give it away. Like we had 2 or 3 thousand customers around the world that adopted it and then never used it, that went in and signed up and then never did their first physical inventory because they'd never done a physical inventory before and it was work. And so they just kept doing it the same way every day, regardless of the fact that they had a new free tool. And free actually was part of the problem because they hadn't spent anything to adopt it. They had no emotional commitment to using it. And so literally we thought we were doing this awesome freemium model where we were going to get all this data and make a lot of money by solving the problem for the guys that we were transmitting orders to. Nobody cared. It literally, it was just work. The bartenders didn't want to do it because they had their way of doing it. And often that involved skimming from their employer, and they didn't want somebody looking over their shoulder and keeping track of everything. And what we found is that it was less than 10% of the customers that signed up for the free software that ever actually used it or did anything with it. And didn't matter how much we pestered them or incentivized them. We even offered to send in people to come train their staff and to do the implementation for them. And that didn't that worked for a minute, and then within a few weeks of their training and launch, they stopped using it again because it was work. It takes effort to do it a different way, and man, sometimes you got to know your customer. Restaurant owners are not technologists. Most of them have a passion for feeding people and food, and that doesn't lend itself to being the thoughtful organizer or scaling an organization. And that's who we were trying to sell to, and it just didn't work.
What if you licensed all the 80,000 Southern Wine and Spirits salespeople to do the work?
We tried to get Cisco Foods. We tried to get Southern Wines and Spirits. It really didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So
how long was that project?
Gosh, man,
when did you call it quits?
I spent money on that for probably 7 or 8 years. Like $200,000 to $500,000 a year for almost a decade, and then finally gave up.
Do you wish you hadn't?
No, it was the right call. It wasn't going anywhere.
No, do you wish you hadn't spent that amount of time on it?
Yeah. I wish I'd have given up sooner.
Yeah.
I'm in a bit of the same situation today with my 3D business. I've had it for since 2014. We've been in that market. I let one of my existing distributing partners convince me to get in the business with them, and then they bailed within 2 years, and I stayed in for another 8. I'm still in it, so it's never been profitable. It's really cool technology, but it's not really ready for commercial scale use at all. And there's only a handful of markets that the technology's really ready for commercial applications, like construction. Home and commercial buildings is probably the most viable commercial market for 3D printing today. And that's scaling up as an industry. That's the future of how we're going to build structures, is 3D printing. But part of the reason is because building structures is really slow and expensive already. So 3D printing is an improvement both on cost and timelines. And so that's what makes it a viable market. In all the other markets, 3D printing is slower and more expensive and doesn't necessarily produce a better part. So there's like this little niche where it really fits and works. And those printers are super expensive and specialized, and all of the others are just toys that are, as I say, that's cute, but it's not very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the analogy of climbing a mountain. If you pick a route and you're just not sure if that route's going to get you to the top, but you keep pushing forward, it's sometimes you got to turn back and start at the bottom again. Yeah. It's just inevitable. And
3D printing, part of what AccuCode does is we facilitate that next generation of distributed device populations. And I saw 3D printing as another generation of technology where the whole market needs qualified people to go do the acquisition, the deployment, the service, the support, the operations. And there just aren't enough mechanical engineers in the world to do all of that work. And I wanted to go apply our approach to problem solving to that market too. It hasn't scaled yet. I mean, the biggest printer manufacturers in the world are still not profitable. 3D Systems has been in business for over 30 years. They're not a profitable company. And they've spent billions buying up other 3D printing companies that they still don't make any money on. And it's like, okay, how long are you going to be in business before you're going to turn a profit? And at a certain point, you got to acknowledge that, hey, we have a problem. This doesn't scale. The biggest printing manufacturers in the world are selling hundreds, maybe a few thousand printers. Well, that's not impressive. We've shipped millions of Android ruggedized mobile computers now. That's a market that's worth getting into. Yeah. When the whole market for something is a few hundred or a few thousand on a global basis annually, well, boy, that's very specialized.
Yeah. So what is your vision for the next 5-10 years for AccuCode? Are you always kind of interested in the next big thing, but becoming maybe a product company? Do you think you're always going to be in services? What do you think the future holds for you?
Our latest software product is called For Work. And we first started developing that product about 10 years ago, and it runs the whole company today, and it has allowed us to go take the expertise of one engineer and use that expertise to go build a process around the delivery, services, or support of an architecture of technology. And to do that in a really scalable, repeatable, sustainable way so that the expertise of that one person can be applied to as many workers as I need to apply it to today. So we're able to take staff with no prior technology experience, put them into a work situation, a task, and the software walks them through step-by-step instructions to do everything. So their first day on the job, they're doing high volume technical tasks, configuring network equipment and mobile devices and printers and security cameras and radios and antennas and you name it. And we're able to go drive super consistent, scalable, repeatable results because of the process engineering and the visibility that we've created around doing it that way. And we take pictures of everything. In our warehouse, it runs our call center, it runs our field service operations, and even work that we did 10 years ago, I can pull it up right now and tell you, here's the pictures of the data rack we installed in the back of that restaurant and what day we did it on and what the serial number and MAC address is of all the equipment we installed in it. And here's pictures. And that allows us to go do on scale what other companies have a really hard time doing consistently. And so you asked me what's next. We're launching, I mentioned early when we were starting this, we're launching our first channel partner program. We're going out into the broader IT channel, and we're offering ourselves as a service partner to go do acquisition, deployment, service, support, asset management. And I don't really care what kind of technology it is. If it plugs into the wall and has a processor, I will take responsibility for that. And now we're going out into the market to do that for software companies and hardware manufacturers and other value-added resellers and managed service providers and integrators. The next generation of technology is focused on automation, true removal of humans from the process. It's robotics, it's RFID, it's visual cognition, where we're moving into what I call ambient data collection, automation, where my facility knows everything that's going on all the time, and the people aren't really participating in any data collection. I'm just using technology to drive their workflow. And that's right now, everybody's focus from a spending standpoint is either on security initiatives or automation. And security is about liability, and automation is about removing as many humans and as many knowledge workers from the process as I can, because they're expensive. The cost of labor has gone up by 30% in the last 5 years, and everybody's trying to figure out how to cut headcount, especially skilled workers. And that's part of what we're focused on doing for the IT channel.
What is your ideal customer for that product are software companies and hardware providers,
Really,
or
any kind of
hardware
B2B
product
technology
companies?
business that is, that needs to scale, that is struggling with how do I go engage with the largest customers and meet their expectations when it comes to how they're going to acquire, deploy, service, support, manage all of those assets. As soon as it becomes a line of business solution, if it doesn't work tomorrow, my business stops working. And it's, as I say, it's like electricity. When the power goes out, everything stops. It's the same with your internet connection now. And now it's the same with all of your technology. If my technology stops working, I can't transact anymore. And that, somebody has to take responsibility for how what the plan is for how we're going to keep everything working every day. And that's what we do.
And you're launching this soon, or it's already
Well, we
launched?
already do this. So one of our largest customers today is Lumen Technologies. We've been doing
Yep.
Lumen's on-site installation work for a decade now. That was why we first built this piece of software, was to facilitate that business model with Lumen. And we do tens of thousands of on-site installation visits a year, and have for a very long time. And doing that on scale is more akin to construction work than it is IT, and it's very challenging. Um, the software allows us to do that in a way that so far nobody else has pulled off. And what we're launching now is a new, broader channel strategy to go take that out to market in a much broader way than we are today, through other technology companies. And we don't really care what kind of technology it is. Whether it's hardware or software, whether it's service related, whether it's a channel partner, don't care. Our job is to help them do things that they can't do today.
And if someone wanted to find out more information about that, or talk with you, how would they go about reaching you?
Go to find AccuCode on LinkedIn or AccuCode.com, and we've got new content coming out just the next 2 weeks on that whole channel partner program. So it'll, if you want, I'll be glad to make sure you get a copy of that press release and announcement here in the next couple of weeks. But this is kind of me saying it out loud publicly for the first time. So thanks for that, Wyatt.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe I'll hold out the release until the launch, so it matches up perfectly.
Hey, I
Awesome.
hate to cut this short, but I gotta wrap it up. I gotta get to my next meeting.
Yep. We're all done. Real pleasure having you on, Kevin. Hope to meet you in person soon. And thanks so much for coming on Peaking.
If you're ever down in the DTC area, hit me up. I'll be glad to host you. All right, take care.